In a bustling city diner, a young waitress named Clara, who was barely making ends meet, was about to get fired over a single cup of coffee. She gave it, for free, to a shivering old man, an act of simple kindness that her cruel boss decided he couldn't let go unpunished. But here's where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. The very next day, that same old man returned, not in rags, but in a gleaming black limousine with lawyers by his side. He was about to change Clara's life forever and give her boss a lesson he would never, ever forget. It's an incredible story that feels like a modern fairy tale, proving that even when the world seems to reward greed, a little bit of kindness might just be the most powerful thing on earth. The world felt heavy on Clara Evans' shoulders. At just 24, she was carrying burdens that would have crushed people twice her age. Her life was a blur of early mornings and late nights, and she constantly smelled of stale coffee and fried bacon. Her alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., a shrill, unwelcome sound in the quiet dark. Before getting up, she'd listen for a few moments to the soft breathing of her younger sister Maya, sleeping in the next room. Maya was her whole world. Maya was born with a weak heart, a beautiful, bright soul, and a body that was constantly fighting itself. The medical bills were a mountain that Clara had been climbing ever since their parents were gone 6 years ago. Every single paycheck, every tip was carefully divided. First, rent for their tiny, drafty apartment. Second, Maya's medicine. The cost made Clara's stomach clench every time she stood at the pharmacy counter. And third, groceries, usually just pasta, bread, and whatever vegetables were on sale. Luxuries weren't even a fantasy. Clara once had her own dreams. She'd wanted to be a teacher and even had a scholarship to the state university. Her future looked bright. But then Maya's condition got worse, and the responsibility fell on Clara. She swapped her textbooks for an order pad and a life spent at the Sunny Side Up diner. Despite all the pressure, Clara refused to let the world break her. She had a deep sense of optimism that most people couldn't understand. She found joy in the little things, the way morning light hit their apartment window, a rare smile from a grumpy customer, or reading to Maya in the evenings. Kindness was just second nature to her. She treated every customer like a person, not a paycheck. She remembered their orders, asked about their families, and offered a kind word to anyone who looked like they were having a rough day. This morning was no different. A late autumn chill had settled over the city. As she made coffee, she glanced at the pile of bills on the kitchen table. The latest notice from the landlord was in red letters. The thought of eviction was a constant hum of anxiety in the back of her mind. She took a deep breath. She had an extra shift today. Maybe the tips would be good. Maybe. She put on her faded yellow uniform, forced a smile in the cracked mirror, and quietly slipped out of the apartment. She didn't know it yet, but in just a few hours, the weight on her shoulders was about to get impossibly heavier, right before it was lifted for good. The Sunny Side Up diner was a local landmark. It wasn't fancy, just a comfortable spot with worn-out vinyl booths, a long counter, and a jukebox that seemed to be stuck in the 70s. The air smelled of home fries and coffee, a greasy but honest smell that promised a warm, full stomach. For most people, it was a second home. But about a year ago, a shadow fell over the diner. That shadow's name was Mr. Richard Henderson. Mr. Henderson was the new manager, sent by some faceless corporation that had bought the place. He was a man who just didn't fit. He wore tight suits, too much cologne, and had a permanent sneer on his face. He wasn't a manager, he was a warden. He lived and breathed by the company policy manual, constantly preaching about profit margins and the sin of unauthorized inventory depletion. To Henderson, customers were units, and his staff were labor assets. He seemed to take a special cruel pleasure in making everyone miserable. He'd yell at a busboy for a single crumb on the floor, or publicly humiliate a cook if a plate was a minute late. Any unsold food had to be thrown out. Free coffee refills were a crime.
Any freebies, no matter how small, were grounds for immediate firing. For some reason, he seemed to have it out for Clara the most. He hated her kindness. "You're too soft, Evans," he'd sneer. "Time is money. These people are here to eat and leave. They are not your friends." He was always watching her, waiting for her to slip up so he could make an example of her. On this particular day, the air in the diner was even tenser than usual. Henderson had lost a lot of money on a bad stock tip and was in a foul mood. He'd already threatened to cut everyone's hours if profits weren't up. Clara moved through the chaos with her usual grace, a small island of calm in a sea of Henderson-induced anxiety. She was in her element, serving people and making them feel welcome. She just had to ignore the storm cloud in the manager's office and get through the day. She had bills to pay and a sister to care for. She didn't know it yet, but her quiet rebellion of kindness was about to cause an explosion. The morning rush faded into a quiet midday lull. Outside, the sky turned a bruised gray as a cold drizzle began to fall against the diner's windows. It was the kind of damp, miserable weather that makes the world feel a little colder. Just then, the bell on the door chimed. An old man stood in the doorway, looking like he wasn't sure he was welcome. His coat was thin and frayed, his shoes were soaked, and his hands trembled from the cold. He looked around the diner with an apologetic air, as if he felt bad for just being there. The other waitresses pointedly ignored him. From his glass office, Mr. Henderson watched, his lip curling in disgust. He saw a transient who would take up a table without paying. But Clara saw something else. She saw a cold, forgotten human being. For a second, he reminded her of her grandfather. Forgetting Henderson's watchful eyes and all his petty rules, she walked towards the man with a warm smile. "Welcome to the sunny side up," she said gently. "It's nasty out there. Come on in and get warm." The old man looked surprised. I don't have much money, miss," he stammered. "I was just hoping to sit for a moment." "Don't you worry about that," Clara said, leading him to a clean booth in the corner. "Please, have a seat." She went behind the counter. The coffee was fresh and hot. She knew the rule, no freebies. She could feel Henderson's eyes on her back. Every rational thought in her head was screaming, "Don't do it." But then she looked over at the old man, rubbing his trembling hands together. In that moment, she made her choice with her heart, not her head. She grabbed a clean mug, filled it to the brim with steaming coffee, and set it down in front of him. "Here you go," she said softly, "on the house. No one should ever have to be that cold." The old man looked at the mug like it was a gold trophy. He wrapped his hands around its warmth, and a small, genuine smile touched his lips. He looked up at Clara, his eyes glistening. "Thank you," he whispered. "God bless you, child. You have no idea what this means." Clara just smiled and turned away, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the diner's heater. She didn't see Mr. Henderson rising from his chair, his face a mask of pure, triumphant rage. She had just sealed her fate with a single cup of coffee.
The moment the mug touched the table, it was like a grenade pin had been pulled. Henderson had seen everything. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. He strode out of his office, his shoes clicking ominously on the floor. "Evans!" he barked, his voice cutting through the quiet diner. Clara froze. She turned slowly and saw the cold, satisfied look on his face. She knew. He ignored her and marched directly to the old man's booth. "Is there a problem with your order, sir?" Henderson asked, his voice dripping with fake politeness. The old man looked alarmed. "Oh, no, sir. This kind young lady." "Did you pay for that coffee?" Henderson interrupted, his voice turning to steel. "Well, she said, did you pay for it?" Henderson repeated, leaning over the table. The old man shrank back. "No, sir, I didn't." Henderson straightened up with a triumphant smirk and turned his gaze on Clara. "Clara," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "could you explain why a non-paying vagrant is consuming company inventory?" "He was cold, Mr. Henderson," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. "It was just a small act of decency." "Decency?" Henderson let out a short, sharp laugh. "Decency doesn't pay the bills. It attracts this." He gestured with contempt at the old man, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "I didn't steal anything," Clara insisted, her voice gaining a bit of strength. "I made a human decision." "You made a decision to steal," Henderson snapped, his voice getting louder. "That coffee costs $2. You stole a $2 asset. That is theft." He was shouting now, his face turning blotchy red. "I will not have thieves working in my establishment," he declared, "and I will not have my authority undermined by some bleeding heart waitress who thinks she's running a charity." He pointed a shaky finger at her. "Clara Evans, I am terminating your employment, effective immediately." The words hit Clara like a punch. Fired. Just like that, in front of everyone, the humiliation was a hot, searing wave. "You can't be serious," she stammered. "Over a cup of coffee?" "Oh, I am deadly serious," Henderson sneered. "Your final paycheck will be mailed to you, minus $2 for the stolen inventory, of course. Now, take off that apron and get out of my diner." Tears stung Clara's eyes, but she refused to let him see her cry. With numb fingers, she untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. She glanced one last time at the old man, whose face was a mask of anguish. She gave him a small, sad smile to let him know it wasn't his fault. Then, with as much dignity as she could find, she walked out the door. The familiar bell chimed, sounding like a funeral knell. She stepped out into the cold rain, and the door swung shut behind her. Mr. Henderson watched her go, a look of profound, ugly satisfaction on his face. He had won. Clara barely remembered the walk home. The city streets seemed hostile and unfamiliar. The cold rain mixed with the tears now streaming down her face. The words echoed in her mind. Terminated. Theft. Get out. She'd been fired for being kind. The absurdity of it was a bitter pill. She'd put up with Henderson's bullying and worked herself to the bone to keep her small family afloat. All of it undone by a $2 cup of coffee. When she got back to her apartment, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the lock. The quiet apartment felt fragile, like a house of cards. Maya was still at school, thank God. How could she explain that their world had just been shattered? She sank onto the worn-out sofa and let the despair wash over her. The panic she had held back for so long came rushing in. She grabbed the bills from the table. The eviction notice stared back at her. Rent was due in a week. How would she pay it? Who would hire a waitress fired for stealing? She thought of Maya's medication, which needed a refill in 3 days. Without her job's insurance, the cost was impossible. An image of Maya, pale and struggling to breathe, flashed in her mind, and a raw sob escaped her lips. She felt completely alone. She sat in the dark for hours. What if she just ignored the old man? Would she still have her job? But could she have lived with herself? As darkness fell, the despair hardened into a grim resolve. She couldn't fall apart. Maya was depending on her. She wiped her tears, turned on a light, and pulled out her old, dusty resume. With a shaky breath, she started typing, searching online job boards late into the night. Around midnight, Maya padded into the living room, rubbing her eyes. "Clara, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetie," Clara said, her voice surprisingly steady as she pulled her sister into a tight hug. "Go on back to bed." As Maya shuffled back to her room, Clara's determination grew stronger. She would not let one cruel man destroy their lives. She had to find a way. As she finally lay down for a restless sleep, she had no idea that across town, wheels were already in motion. The longest night of her life was about to give way to the unbelievable day. The next morning was gray and unforgiving, just like Clara's mood. She was staring at the same pile of bills when she heard a low, powerful rumble from the street below, a sound that did not belong in her neighborhood. She peeked out the window and her breath caught in her throat. Parked right in front of her building was a long, black, gleaming limousine. It looked so out of place, it was like it had dropped from another planet. Her first thought was that they were being evicted in the most dramatic way possible. But then the back door of the limo opened. Two men in sharp suits got out first. They looked like lawyers. Then a third man emerged, and Clara gasped. It was the old man from the diner. But he was transformed. Gone was the frayed coat. Now he was dressed in a custom-tailored suit. His silver hair was neatly combed, and he stood tall with an air of quiet, unshakable authority. He still had the same kind eyes, but now they were sharp and clear. He looked up, his eyes met hers, and he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Clara stumbled back from the window, her mind reeling. Was this a dream? A prank? A sharp knock on her door jolted her back to reality. Her legs felt like jelly as she opened it. One of the lawyers stood there. "Miss Clara Evans?" he asked. Yes," she stammered. "My name is Mr. Davies. I represent Mr. Abernathy. He has requested to speak with you. He asked if you would accompany us back to the Sunny Side Up diner. He has some unfinished business." "Go back to the diner? The scene of my humiliation? Why?" As if sensing her confusion, Mr. Davies added, "I can assure you, Miss Evans, it is in your best interest. Mr. Abernathy would like to rectify the injustice you suffered yesterday." "Injustice? Someone powerful is acknowledging what happened to me?" A tiny spark of hope flickered to life. "Let me just get my coat," she said. As she stepped into the limousine, the door closed with a soft, expensive thud, sealing her off from the world she knew and transporting her towards a future she could never have imagined.
The ride back to the diner was silent, but buzzing with anticipation. When the limousine pulled up, it was like a scene from a movie. The lunch rush was in full swing, and through the window, Clara could see Mr. Henderson barking orders, a smug look on his face. "Miss Evans," the lawyer said, "we'd like you to come inside. Please just stand back and observe." The moment Mr. Abernathy and his lawyers walked through the door, the diner fell silent. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Everyone turned to stare. Mr. Henderson, annoyed by the sudden quiet, looked up. He didn't recognize Mr. Abernathy at first. All he saw was money and power, and he instantly switched from a tyrant to a suck-up. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome," he said, rushing toward them with a greasy smile. "Table for 3? I have our best booth available." Mr. Abernathy held up a hand. "We're not here for a meal, Mr. Henderson." Henderson's smile faltered. "Oh? How can I help you?" "I was here yesterday," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "Though I imagine I look a little different today." A flicker of recognition, then dawning horror washed over Henderson's face. His jaw went slack. He looked from Mr. Abernathy's expensive suit back to the memory of the old frayed coat. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. You, he stammered. Yes, me, the vagrant you were so worried about. The man who was shown a simple kindness by one of your employees, an act for which you publicly fired her. He gestured to Clara in the doorway. Henderson's eyes darted between them, filled with pure panic. Sir, I was just following company policy, he pleaded, his voice trembling. I had no idea. Policy? Mr. Abernathy's voice cut like a whip. Well, let me tell you about a policy you overlooked. Mr. Davies stepped forward and handed a thick folder to the stunned manager. As of 8 a.m. this morning, Abernathy Enterprises completed its acquisition of the parent company that owns this diner franchise. All of it. A collective gasp swept through the room. My name is Edward Abernathy, he said, stepping closer to Henderson. I own this place. I own the chair you're standing next to. And Mr. Henderson, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl, I own your job. He paused. And as the new owner, my first order of business is this. You are fired. Henderson staggered back. You can't. I have a contract. My lawyers will discuss your severance. Now I believe the procedure is to take off your name badge and get out. You have 2 minutes. Utterly broken, Henderson fumbled with his name badge, threw it on the floor, shot a look of pure hatred at Clara, and scrambled out the door. The diner erupted in relieved applause. Waitresses were hugging, crying tears of joy. Mr. Abernathy walked over to Clara, his expression softening. Miss Evans, what you did yesterday, you did it because you are a person of profound character. That is more valuable than any rule in a policy manual. He smiled. This diner deserves a leader who understands that, which is why I am not offering you your old job back. I am offering you a new one. I want you to be the new manager. Clara was speechless. Manager? But I don't know how. You know how to be kind, Mr. Abernathy said simply. We can teach you the rest. I'm also offering you a starting salary of $85,000 a year and full health benefits for you and your sister. Tears of pure joy finally spilled down Clara's cheeks. She looked at her coworkers who were all smiling and nodding at her. She looked at Mr. Abernathy, this unbelievable angel in disguise. Yes, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, I accept. The transformation of the Sunny Side Up diner began that very day. It wasn't a renovation of the building, but a restoration of its soul. The cloud of fear vanished, replaced by laughter and teamwork. Clara stepped into her new role with a natural grace that surprised everyone but Mr. Abernathy. She didn't hide in an office. She led from the floor, working alongside her team. Her first act as manager was to take Henderson's thick policy manual and drop it with a satisfying thud into the dumpster. Her new rules were simple. Rule number 1, treat everyone with dignity. Rule number 2, a hot meal and a warm drink are a right, not a privilege. Rule number 3, kindness is always the special of the day. She started a Pay It Forward board, where customers could prepay for a coffee or meal for someone in need. The unsold food at night was no longer thrown away. It was packed up and donated to a local homeless shelter. Mr. Abernathy became a regular, always sitting in the same corner booth. One afternoon, he slid a check across the table. It was for $50,000. What is this? Clara gasped. Consider it back pay, he said with a smile. For the emotional distress. Pay off your debts. Take Maya on a vacation. Live without fear, Clara. You've earned it. Clara's life, once a landscape of struggle, bloomed. The eviction notices stopped. The medical bills disappeared. She and Maya moved into a small house with a sunny backyard. For the first time, Clara could breathe. The story of what happened at the Sunny Side Up diner became a local legend. People came from all over, not just for the food, but to visit the place where kindness had won. The diner was more successful than ever, proving that a business built on humanity can be far more valuable than one built on greed. Clara Evans, the once struggling waitress, had resurrected the heart of her community, all with one simple, life-changing cup of free coffee. Stories like Clara's have become modern legends, shared online and around the world. And while this exact tale of the waitress and the secret billionaire might be more of an inspirational parable than a documented news story, the lesson it holds is undeniably real. It serves as a powerful reminder that the true measure of our character is how we treat people, especially when we think no one important is watching. Her story proves that compassion is a currency that never loses its value, and a single act of kindness can create ripples you never expect. If you were moved by this story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more uplifting content. And be sure to share it with someone who needs a reminder that a good deed is never, ever wasted. Let us know in the comments, what's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you? Your stories help keep this spirit alive. Thank you for watching.